Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta babies and toddlers now eligible to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Plus, Lethbridge #1 in Canada again. We tell you what for. And softball-sized hail hits central Alberta, causing damage to cars and buildings.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Children and babies in Alberta are now eligible to receive a dose of the Moderna Spikevax vaccine. Health Canada approved Moderna's vaccine for infants and preschoolers in mid-July. Alberta is the last jurisdiction in the country to open up vaccine eligibility to the age group, making the announcement on Friday. The recommended dose for children ages 6 months to 11 years is a series of 2 doses with an interval of at least 2 months between each shot. And for the first time in 4 years, thousands of people gathered to spectate the annual Lethbridge International Air Show this weekend at the airport. There were lots of aerial performances with a CF-18 performance as the headliners for both days. In terms of military planes, though, the air show did not have much on display as there was a shortage of military assets in Canada, according to the organizer of the show. Well, one man is in hospital in serious condition after his vehicle hit a power pole this morning just off of Highway 3 near Coaldale. RCMP responded to the accident just after 8 o'clock this morning. They told Bridge City News he was airlifted by Stars Air Ambulance to Calgary. We're told road and weather conditions were good and the accident is under investigation. And check out these pictures. The sky over central Alberta opened up and rained down hail, and a lot of it on Monday. Some hail, even the size of softballs, wreaked havoc on vehicles and property off of the QE2 near Markerville, Alberta, and in Innisfail. And 2 hours away in Nordig, smaller-sized hail caught some hikers off guard who literally had to make a run for it. According to Jesse Wager of Environment and Climate Change Canada, it was a series of supercell storms that moved through the area from the west, beginning in the foothills that traveled east and southeast. We're told the largest hailstones measured 10.6 centimeters in diameter, which, according to Wagner, is getting to the top of the charts for Alberta. Well, once again, Lethbridge is #1, but it's not for a good reason. The 2021 Crime Severity Index report is in, and Lethbridge again scored the highest. Lethbridge's score in 2021 was 128.65, with a 7% decrease from the previous year. The CSI score monitors the severity level of police-reported crimes. Now, Chief of Police Shaheen Madizadeh says the type of crime that is bringing the overall number up is not from violent crimes.
A lot of them are property-related crime, break-in enters, etc., and opportunity crimes, lack of better words. So in that sense, the crime, obviously we're #1, but we also have to realize when you look at the geographic area, it's not just city of Lethbridge. They're combining rural areas around Lethbridge, Coaldale, and other communities that we have no control over how they are policed. So, but when you look at the city of Lethbridge, it's on a major downward trend, which we have to celebrate. The bad news is we're still #1.
Meanwhile, Mayor Blaine Higgins says in terms of other cities in the country, Lethbridge does well for keeping its residents safe.
It's really came on strong, especially with the opioid pandemic. And you know what? I feel safe here, and I would recommend anyone to have a look at other communities and see how we fare, because we actually do quite well. It's scary to have those numbers that high, and we just hope that with those support services that we can get them lower.
Higgins says a resolution will be brought forward in the fall with the hopes of increasing the police budget so officers have the adequate resources to help with crime in the city. And speaking of crime, the tent encampments in Lethbridge have been a large focus here on Bridge City News lately. Between the crime, a shooting spree, and the heartbreaking situation of homelessness, there's been a lot to discuss. But Ken Kissick of Streets Alive Mission says until the root problem is tackled, help may be a long time coming for those living in the tents.
more affordable housing units are part of the solution. But no, if we don't go after the root, then the problem just continues to grow. It's not that it stops growing; it grows. Addiction is a horrible, horrible thing, and with what's been going on in the world with COVID and now with inflation, more and more people have less and less hope, and that drives them into addiction.
You can catch more of that full interview with Ken Kissick coming up in the latter half of the show. The manager of the Lethbridge Police Services, the Watch program, Jeff Cove, has been honored with a Blackfoot name over the weekend. Cove, who started out as a volunteer with the program, was given a special name during the ceremony at the Multicultural Center on Monday. And in a statement from LPS, Cove says he is, quote, humbled and beyond words and very grateful to receive the honor of having a Blackfoot name given to me, end quote. Downtown Lethbridge is about to get a little more bright. A new initiative by several local organizations is hoping to spark some much-needed color into downtown Lethbridge. A total of 50 plant containers that are being called pollinator cafes will be displayed in different areas of the city and will showcase the biodiversity of local pollinators. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains, this is the first pilot project for the city.
Humans, we are drawn to nature because we are nature as well.
The Pollinator Cafes came together as part of a collaboration between the Helen Schuler Nature Center, Opportunity Lethbridge, and the City of Lethbridge's Urban Revitalization and Parks Departments. Corinne Putman, the manager of the Helen Schuler Nature Center, explained what the Pollinator Cafes are all about during a presentation on Tuesday morning.
Easy to grow annuals and some of the plants that not only are beautiful, but that actually provide services for pollinators as well. There is some eye-catching infographic signage that features local artist Elizabeth Porter's cartoons. Those provide information on what is attractive to pollinators and what they're benefiting from as well. We also have photos from local biologist Jason Headley, who's an amazing photographer. Those feature QR codes that, when scanned, take you to the iNaturalist app so that people can engage in citizen science as part of the Pollinator Cafe experience.
Andrew Malcolm, the Urban Revitalization Manager for the City of Lethbridge, says the new flower planters are self-watering.
So there's a basin at the bottom that's filled once every 3 weeks, and they self-wick, so we don't have to maintain them every single day. So it really cuts down on our maintenance costs.
Putman says the plan is to carry on with the Pollinator Cafes going into next year. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Well, a new company is putting in the work to help out veterans here in our city. Kilo 9 Elite Training Lethbridge is hosting an event where motorcycle enthusiasts will be taking their bikes out for a spin to raise money for veterans in Lethbridge who are in need of a support dog. The veterans and dogs will then be paired together. Organizer Corey Unruh says the government hasn't stepped up when it comes to helping veterans, and he has his own story of how support dogs have been there for him and his family during a few hard times.
In my own personal experience, my wife and I, we lost a child in 2019 to suicide. And when he was discovered, he was discovered by our youngest. That same year in December, my stepson lost his dad. Getting a dog was the best thing for him. It literally saved his life, and he'll tell you that every day. And that's what this is about, right? So, I mean, it's just not what my wife and I went through. It's what a veteran goes through, right? And at the end of the day, I mean, that's what dogs are for, the companionship, the support, PTSD. We all suffer from it in one way or another. And of course, the pandemic has created a lot of problems for a lot of people, right?
All of the funds for the event will stay here in Lethbridge to help out veterans. The festivities will start with a barbecue at 9 a.m. at the Kilo 9 Elite Training Building in Lethbridge on August the 6th, and the bikes will take off at 12 noon sharp. The lawyer for a woman who filed a lawsuit against Hockey Canada over an alleged group sexual assault involving members of the 2018 World Junior team says his client recently passed a polygraph exam. The test result has been provided to police in London, Ontario, Hockey Canada, and NHL investigators. The woman's allegation that 8 players sexually assaulted her following a gala event in the city has also prompted an inquiry into Hockey Canada's actions by the International Ice Hockey Federation. Police say a man armed with a large knife inside Calgary City Hall was arrested this morning. Police and firefighters were called to the building located on the corner of 7th Avenue and McLeod Trail just before 4 a.m. They say the man also allegedly set 4 separate fires on the 3rd floor, causing the sprinkler system to go off. The Calgary Fire Department says that though the damage is minimal, there is water damage from the sprinkler system, and it's expected that the 3rd floor will be off limits for some time. Saskatchewan RCMP are warning the public about the release of a violent sex offender who they said is at a high risk of offending again. Roland Clifford Morissette, who was 54, was released from prison today and has intentions to move to Mont Nebo and occasionally visits the areas of Alisk, Miskawasis First Nation, Shellbrook, and Prince Albert. RCMP say Morissette has a criminal record that contains both violent and sexual offenses connected to substance use. They say he also has a history of reoffending and non-compliance with release conditions. Saskatoon Police are examining the cell phone records and bank records of an Indigenous woman who has been missing for 11 days. Dawn Walker and her 7-year-old son, Vincent Jansen, were last seen at a business in the city. Her cell phone hasn't been found, but her truck and personal belongings were later found at a park just south of Saskatoon. The RCMP is also involved in the search. Federal Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos says his government will invest $17.9 million to expand HIV testing. HIV activists say the announcement is a good first step, but that the government should do more.
We know that HIV is preventable, yet the rates of HIV infections remain high in Canada and in other countries. Providing individuals with access to testing, treatment, and care can help reverse this trend. Removing barriers is the key to ending the AIDS pandemic. Through the pandemic, we've heard to innovate to reach people and connecting them to care. Now we are taking the lessons from this other pandemic and applying them to our own AIDS efforts.
The U.S. Justice Department is suing the state of Idaho, arguing that its new abortion law violates a federal law because it does not allow doctors to provide medically necessary treatment, according to Attorney General Merrick Garland.
The suit seeks to hold invalid the state's criminal prohibition on providing abortions as applied to women who are suffering medical emergencies. Under a federal law known as the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, or EMTALA, every hospital that receives Medicare funds must provide necessary stabilizing treatment to a patient who arrives at an emergency room suffering from a medical condition that could place their life or health in serious jeopardy. When a hospital determines that an abortion is the medical treatment necessary to stabilize a patient's emergency medical condition, it is required by federal law to provide that treatment.
As the war between Russia and Ukraine drags on, a team of Billy Graham Rapid Response Team chaplains is seeing a growing openness to the gospel as they minister to thousands of people throughout Ukraine impacted by the war.
Since the war in Ukraine began, a team of Billy Graham Rapid Response Team chaplains have been working alongside Christian relief charity Samaritan's Purse, primarily at their mobile hospitals, providing spiritual support to those impacted by this conflict. Over the past 5 months, they've trained 200 Ukrainian chaplains. They prayed with over 3,000 people, and over 350 people have come to faith in Christ. Josh Holland is their international director.
The sense of the unknown weighs heavy on people's hearts. It's no foreseeable end in sight. We ministered to people that have had siblings and children and spouses die. We've ministered to many people that are separated. Wives and children, got to a safer place while husbands have had to stay back. And so just crisis, trauma, pain, grief on every level.
Holland says they'll continue to help the people of Ukraine for as long as it takes.
We may be there for months or years or as long as the need is there. And so our long-term plans really include training more chaplains. There's all kinds of opportunity just to talk to people, listen to people, pray with people. And then as God gives those opportunities, ultimately to present the hope that we all have through a relationship with God's Son, Jesus Christ.
The muddy floor of the Bay of Fundy during low tide at Hopewell Rocks on the southern coast of New Brunswick became the unlikely scene of an obstacle course competition as shooting prepared to wrap up on CBC's upcoming TV series, Canada's Ultimate Challenge. Professional snowboarder and sports analyst Craig McMorris and sports broadcaster Nikki Reyes hosts the 8 one-hour-long episodes.
We started in Squamish, British Columbia, so we dipped our toes in the Pacific and the Atlantic. We went up north to Whitehorse in the Yukon. That was extremely special. These challenges are extremely hard, but what I think is really special about this program and very unique about it is these challenges are on Canada's most iconic locations. Bridges, structures, all that kind of stuff comes into play. It's not just a sprint, it's never just a climb. There's always something more to this, and I think that's kind of our secret ingredient here.
Kentucky National Guard video shows helicopters rescuing flood victims last week. The U.S. National Guard Bureau top general says helicopters rescued about 400 people. Kentucky's governor says at least 37 are known dead, while hundreds are unaccounted for. The flooding began last week when eastern Kentucky and parts of Virginia and West Virginia got up to 10.5 inches of rain in just 48 hours. The water poured down hillsides and into valleys and hollows, engulfing entire towns. Mudslides marooned some people on steep slopes. Wow, that is some crazy video. No flooding here, thankfully, and it looks like Alberta's heat warning is finally subsiding as well. I will have all of the weather details coming up for you right after the break. Welcome back. Well, we reached only about a high of 25 degrees with those heat warnings no longer in effect, down from those 30-plus degree days. We're going to be heading back there, though, by the end of the week. Into this evening, we're looking at partly cloudy skies. We could see a chance of some showers. Also, winds kicking up tomorrow. We're going to see lots of sunshine, high of 26 degrees, but winds could be up to 60 kilometers per hour before diminishing down to 20K and then back up again to 60K overnight on Wednesday evening. Into Thursday, looking at a high of 29 degrees, lots of sunshine there. Sunny skies remaining throughout the rest of the week. High of only 21 on Friday, then back up to 28 for Saturday, and then back up into the 30s for the weekend. So looking at a high of 31 degrees on Sunday, and then into Monday, 31 as well. So the almanac tells us that the average high for this time of year is 26 degrees, average low 11 degrees. 36 was our high temperature on this day. Back in 1971, it was a hot one. But in 1999, not so much. It was a chillier one. 5 degrees was only, was the low, actually. That was the lowest on record for this day. 6:03 is when the sun rose this morning. Our sunset this evening at 9:12 p.m., giving us just over 15 hours of daylight. So on the west coast, looking at the highs tomorrow in Victoria, 22 degrees, mainly cloudy skies there. Into Vancouver, looking at a 30% chance of showers in the morning, then a 70% chances of rain by the afternoon. 20 the high there, 24 the high in both Edmonton and Calgary tomorrow. Both of those cities looking at some sunshine. Calgary could see a little bit of wind, not quite as much as Lethbridge though. Saskatoon looking at 25 degrees tomorrow. Same thing for Regina with partly cloudy skies. Winnipeg seeing a chance of rain, could see a risk of a thunderstorm as well. Winds kicking up to 60 kilometers per hour at a high of 23 degrees. Now as we look to the central part of the country, 31 degrees the high in Toronto, 40% chance of shower. Risk of a thunderstorm with the humidex going to feel like 41. So it's going to be warm and muggy there in Toronto. Sunshine though in both Ottawa and Montreal. Ottawa sitting at 26, Montreal at 27 tomorrow. 28 the high though in Fredericton, 27 in Halifax. Halifax looking at a 30% chance of showers. Showers also expected tomorrow in Charlottetown. 24 the high and 24 also the high expected tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with some showers and fog there as well. There you have it. That is your forecast. The United States officially entered a recession last week with another quarter of economic decline. Is Canada going to follow, though? Well, according to Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, we could follow suit, albeit not as intense.
The good news is that if we do hit a recession, it looks like it will be a mild one. It's not going to be deep. It's not going to be prolonged. We're not talking about seeing the economy shrink by even 2%. We're talking about in the 1% range. A deep recession will lead to a depression. I'm not seeing anything that looks that way, but we're, as several economists have pointed out, if the US goes into a recession, and they're in one, albeit mild, we're likely going to follow suit. It'll be hard for us not to. So, and if we don't hit that technical definition of a recession, it might be because we're just over, but the economic growth is sluggish at best.
You can catch that full interview coming up after the break. Well, the Northwest Territories plans to develop a vehicle charging corridor between the Alberta boundary and Yellowknife to encourage more residents to buy electric vehicles to reduce their carbon footprint. The federal government has committed to a mandatory 100% zero-emission vehicle sales target by 2035 for all new light-duty vehicles, with interim targets for at least 20% of sales by 2026 and 60% by 2030. A study commissioned by the territorial government forecasts electric vehicles could account for 2.9 to 11.3% of all annual car and small truck sales in the territory in 2030. The study estimates greenhouse gas emissions could be by between 260 and 1,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in that year. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 187 points on the day to finish at 19,505. The Dow was down 402 to 32,396. The S&P 500 was down 27 points to 4,091, and the Nasdaq was down 20 points to 12,348. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 11 cents to 93.78 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 60 cents to 7.69 US. Gold was up 51 cents to 17.60.91 US per ounce, and silver was up a cent to 19.99 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.43 per bushel, barley $8.23, canola is at $18.40, and corn is at $10.80 per bushel. Live cattle were down 20 cents to $136.58. Feeder cattle were down $1.53 to $178.13. Lean hogs were down 60 cents to $119.85. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 77.66 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, toddlers in Alberta are now eligible to receive a dose of the Moderna vaccine. Health Canada approved Moderna's vaccine for infants and preschoolers in mid-July. Alberta is the last jurisdiction in the country to open up vaccine eligibility to that age group, making the announcement on Friday. The recommended dose for children ages 6 months to 11 years is a series of 2 doses with an interval of at least 2 months between each shot. Up next, could Canada see a recession soon? Well, we speak with Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley to find out. Plus, Mr. Lilley tells us about why Canadians are once again upset with the Prime Minister. That is coming up right after the break. Stay with us. Well, just as many Canadians are right now, Justin Trudeau is on vacation. He and his family are in Costa Rica. But when that news broke over the weekend, the reaction was fury from both Trudeau supporters and critics. Joining me to discuss this is Brian Lilley. Brian, what do you mean about this fury that people are having towards the Prime Minister for traveling?
Well, his critics were furious that he's on a vacation, and his supporters are furious that you're even mentioning the vacation. All of this is bizarre, Jeanette, because look, the American president takes a vacation, and the media follow him. I mean, the president doesn't go anywhere without a pool camera and a pool reporter.
Yeah.
It's actually called the Death Watch because somebody has to be there in case the president dies.
Oh, boy.
Everyone needs to know about it. But all the networks will follow. You think back to whether it's Biden or somebody going to Camp David, the official vacation retreat of the president. President Obama used to love going to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. George Bush used to go to his ranch. There'd always be cameras there. It would even make the Canadian news that the U.S. president is on vacation right now. Here he is riding a bike, going for ice cream, things like that. So of course we're going to note that Justin Trudeau's on vacation, but his supporters are furious that we even mention it. Don't you know he's entitled to a vacation? And his critics are like, wow, he's on another vacation. Does this guy ever work? Yeah, he does. And look, I've been critical of him in his first year. He took 10 vacations. Now, some of them were just extended long weekends of 4 or 5 days, that sort of thing. But 10 vacations in a year was a bit much. He's cooled that down. He hasn't been out of the country on vacation in a while now, but he's in Costa Rica now. It's the same place his family went in 2019. My issue, and I wrote about this in the Toronto Sun, is that this is a guy who's trying to get all of us to reduce our carbon footprint, whether it's you and I and how we live our lives, or farmers and fertilizer, all of those things. This guy's carbon footprint is off the charts.
Yeah, exactly. I know you have been writing about that, just that serious criticism that he's making that carbon footprint from his travels. I mean, yeah, we're all entitled to a vacation and to travel, Prime Minister included, but I guess the records show that the Prime Minister travels a lot by plane, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. So over the last month, in the month of July, it was 26,000 kilometers. It was more than that, or about the same, in June. So that's more than 50,000 kilometers in 2 months alone. The guy has been traveling nonstop, just 11 days not on the plane in the month of July. You look at other analysis that has been done over the last while, from June of last year till April of this year, it was 127,000 kilometers. To put that in perspective, that's more than 3 times around the globe flying.
Wow.
This is a man who tells you and I to reduce our carbon footprint, to put on a sweater in the winter, to stop using plastic forks for the environment and climate change, tells farmers to reduce their fertilizer use by 30%, and travels around the world more than 3 times by plane in less than a year. And to give you examples, not included in that analysis I just gave you, was that just after his government tabled their budget in April, he flew from Ottawa to Victoria to sell the budget. Then he went from Victoria to Edmonton, Edmonton to Laval, Quebec. That'd be fine if that was the end of it. But then he flew all the way back to Whistler to go on one of these vacations. He did a ski vacation over the Easter weekend. Why didn't he go from Ottawa down the highway to Laval, fly out to Edmonton, fly to Victoria, and then, all right, I'm out here, I'm going to Whistler? That would have cut his carbon footprint in half.
Yeah.
Instead, he lectures the rest of us while living a completely different lifestyle than he thinks Canadians should be up for. One thing that's interesting that I'll try and find out before we talk next week is whether he'll be using the ArriveCan app when he comes back into Canada.
Interesting, because he should be, because he's definitely pushing it. I know I had to use it this weekend when I came back from Montana, so I would hope the Prime Minister would have to as well.
We should hope so, because I don't find it too difficult to use, but a lot of people do, and maybe he'd see some of the issues with it. Even people I know who have had no problem using it in the past have had glitches telling them to quarantine for 2 weeks, even though by the government's own requirements, there's no need for them, but it's a glitch in ArriveCan. So the Prime Minister should see what the policies he's putting in place actually mean for Canadians. Get a taste of it. I'm not saying he's got to fly in the last row in economy on his way back from Costa Rica, but maybe get a little taste of why people have been complaining about travel, whether it be at Pearson Airport in Toronto, or in Montreal, or in Calgary, which is not quite as bad, but still bad. In Vancouver, getting really bad as well.
Yeah.
He should experience a little bit of this so that he knows there's something to be fixed.
Yeah, and also you're looking at not all the population has smartphones either, like my mom.
A lot of seniors.
Yeah, absolutely. So what, Brian, is the state of the push by the Trudeau government to get farmers to reduce fertilizer emissions? So this is a move that most say would mean reducing fertilizer use and reduce crop yields, right? So have the feds given any wiggle room to farmers on this?
No, they haven't, which is why I keep needling the Trudeau government over their carbon footprint while telling farmers, him flying all over the world while telling farmers to reduce. The government says, look, this isn't about reducing fertilizer use. It's about reducing nitrous oxide emissions, which is a greenhouse gas, from fertilizer. And you talk to the Canadian Wheat Growers Association, Canola Council, Fertilizer Canada, individual farmers. None of them think that you can reduce the emissions from fertilizer without reducing fertilizer. There is one type of fertilizer. It's not up to scale yet, but the other problem with it has lower nitrous oxide emissions, but it also leaves plastic in the soil. So, is that really a great solution? Not at this point. So they want farmers to do something they don't have a solution for. And they're saying instead of using intensity-based targets, as in, reduce the amount of fertilizer that you use to produce a bushel of certain crop, or the amount of fertilizer you use per acre for whatever crop it is you're producing. Instead of going on intensity, they want absolute emissions reductions. The entire ag sector says, no, let us work with you. We'll come up with ways to do this. Canada is one of the lowest countries when it comes to fertilizer use among agricultural producers, one of the lowest in in fertilizer use per acre. And yet the government is determined to do this. It will reduce crop yields for sure. I've talked to farmers from Ontario straight through the prairies on this. They all tell me the same story. And by the way, if you haven't seen the price of fertilizer yet, nobody's wanting to use more fertilizer than they have to because the price has gone up dramatically. If you bought last August, September in advance, you're probably doing well. If not, you're paying, depending on when you bought, between 2, 3, 4 times. Of course, seeding's done now, but that's what you were paying to get crop into the ground this year.
Yeah, fertilizer, gas, groceries, you name it, right? Everything's going up. It's crazy. Okay, so it looks like just over 2 years ago, the federal government banned a group of firearms. And so last week, they've released their price list to buy back some of these firearms. You say there's 2 problems with this, Brian. What are they?
Well, one problem is that the price is too low. So to use the rifle that everyone hears about in the news, that the government uses as their example all the time, the AR-15, the most popular target shooting rifle in North America, about 100,000 at least in Canada. And guess what? They're not used in crimes, not the legal ones, not the ones from the licensed owners. But they say, okay, it's banned. You can't use it anymore, and we're going to buy it off of you. Well, they've offered $1,300. The average AR starts at $1,500. I've spoken to people who said, well, my first one was $2,400, but all the ones I've bought since are more than that. People spend a lot of money on firearms. So some viewers may say, well, I don't like any guns, so I don't care. Why do they get any money? Because when the government seizes your property, which is effectively what they're doing here, the courts and the law in our country say whoever they're taking the property off of has to be offered a fair price. And this is not a fair price. Some people have bought cheap, knockoff ARs for $800. They're going to make money on this. The majority are going to get less than they paid by a significant margin. So the courts won't appreciate that. And this will be battled out in court. And it's going to cost a lot of money. But here's the other problem. It's already costing millions to develop this program. But despite it being more than 2 years in, Jeanette, there's no program. No program at all. They put up 2 weeks ago a request for information looking to companies to say, do you have any idea, because they're just at the idea stage, any idea how we could collect, transport, track all of these firearms, how we could destroy them, how we could recycle the metals and the plastics after destroying them? They use the term notional stage. They're at the notional stage. That means the theoretical stage. They don't have anything concrete, and this was 824 days ago, more than 2 years, and they've got nothing to show for it other than a price list, which I think is about keeping this in the news and getting good headlines for the Liberal government where they want good headlines instead of all the bad ones about fertilizer, passports, and everything else.
Okay, and then speaking of firearms, Brian, Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino was in Alberta last week, and in one interview he said that we would have handguns effectively banned if the Conservatives didn't get in the way. So what did he mean by that?
Well, if you remember a little while ago, there was the handgun freeze. So they talked about letting municipalities ban handguns, and then they talked about provinces banning handguns. And then it looked like they might ban them and said, well, we're just going to freeze them. So if you've got one, you can keep it. If you don't have one, you can't get one. But that required some steps going through Parliament. And the Conservatives said, no, we want to study this. The Liberals wanted them just to give a rubber stamp to an idea that was written down on the back of a napkin, cocktail napkin in a bar, because that's the level of thought that went into it. And the Conservatives said no. So you've got this guy who's actually in the government, blaming the opposition for not giving them absolute power. I'm sorry, Mr. Mendocino, that's not how our system works. You're a lawyer, you're a former Crown prosecutor, you know how our system works. Smarten up and fly right and stop trying to blame other people for your own mistakes.
Okay, Brian, you did give the Trudeau government credit for something last week, getting a win on a cross-border dispute. So you don't praise the Trudeau government often, so what happened there?
Well, there was a push that we talked about several times on the program here about trying to have the Americans wanted to say they'll give a very generous credit for people to buy electric vehicles, but only if they're assembled in the United States, 50% American parts with an American-made battery in a unionized shop. Well, it was that last part that caused some American senators who have non-union auto plants in their districts to say, no, we're not voting for this. So Senator Joe Manchin, he's a Democrat, but a bit of a renegade Democrat. He stopped that. That if it had gone through, and seriously, if it didn't have that union element, it would have gone through, it would have passed. That would have decimated Canada's auto industry. And last fall, I was blasting the Trudeau government for being asleep at the switch and ignoring that this almost passed. Well, Joe Manchin stopping it over the union rule gave the Trudeau government time. They put in the effort. They did what they needed to do. They partnered with the Ford government here in Ontario. They partnered with industry, and they got that element removed. So now it's going to be a tax credit, but for North American made autos. We just finished renegotiating the free trade deal with Canada, the US, and Mexico, and they were about to become super protectionist. So they did exactly what I asked them to do last fall. I had to give them credit for it. Some people out west, especially, were very upset at me for giving them any credit. My response was, look, if they listen to me on the fertilizer ban, on softwood lumber, on firearms, on any of the other things, if they do exactly what I asked them to do, I'll give them credit on those as well. I hope they're listening on things like the fertilizer ban and they walk away, because that would be the right thing to do. And it'd be good, especially not just for prairie farmers, but especially for prairie farmers.
Okay, something on everybody's mind here, the economy. So the U.S. officially entered a recession last week with another quarter of economic decline. Is Canada going to follow?
I hope not, but the signs are definitely pointing that way. The Royal Bank and their chief economist have predicted a mild recession coming up in this current year. So we could see that happen. We won't get our latest quarterly numbers until the end of August. The Americans released them several weeks ahead of us. So we'll get ours at the end of August. We didn't go down in May the way that some had thought. So that's a good sign. But there are troubling signs. There's inflation. There's the interest rate hikes from the Bank of Canada to try and control inflation. There are a lot of economic markers, manufacturing going down, exports going down. Now, the good news is that if we do hit a recession, it looks like it will be a mild one. It's not going to be deep. It's not going to be prolonged. We're not talking about seeing the economy shrink by even 2%. We're talking about in the 1% range. A deep recession will lead to a depression. I'm not seeing anything that looks that way, but as several economists have pointed out, if the US goes into a recession, and they're in one, albeit mild, we're likely going to follow suit. It'll be hard for ours not to. So, and if we don't hit that technical definition of a recession, it might be because we're just over, but the economic growth is sluggish at best.
Wow, will be interesting to see what happens. It does look like we are out of time, but Brian Lilly, Toronto Sun columnist, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Homeless encampments have become an issue in many cities across North America, including right here in Lethbridge. What are some possible solutions, though? Well, joining us today to discuss this is Ken Kissick. He is one of the co-founders of Streets Alive Mission in Lethbridge. He joins us now. Ken, thanks so much for joining us once again on Bridge City News. So great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Ken, can you first of all share maybe a little bit about Streets Alive Mission and what you do to help the needy in southern Alberta?
I certainly would thank you for the opportunity. Obviously, with the mission itself, we provide a warming or a cooling center, depending on the seasons. We provide trusteeship. We provide the pin bank, which is the closet for the street people. It's a place of safety. We have a new operation called Care Cuts, so we're providing haircuts to the street population weekly. Again, the trusteeships. We also provide a water. There's a water station, a bathroom, a telephone for them to use. We also have our repurpose center, which is providing for those that are wanting to rehouse the agencies. We do our outreach, which is basically trying to engage with the people, build the relationships, check on them, provide them with a little bit of water, but really we're keeping an eye on them. And then obviously we have our recovery programs, Exodus and Genesis for men and women, for those who actually want to get away from the addiction cycle and come out. So that's a broad picture of what we do.
Such important work that you do.
It is.
Yeah.
And so, we probably deal with about 100 people a day. So.
Ken, what kinds of problems typically arise when we see homeless encampments set up in various areas around the city?
I think one of the things to remember is that this year encampments seem to be on the increase, and they are. But really, that's a big community problem. And one of the things that we fail to realize with Lethbridge, we talk about the city of 100,000 people, but really our business draws 400,000 people. And so we have those kinds of problems. Now, encampments, obviously, things that happen with them is you see an increase in crime. You're going to see an increase in needle debris and some of the behaviors that come with it. But again, we're dealing with a population that has no place to go, and so they are simply living rough.
That's putting it mildly. Absolutely. Now, Ken, are the majority of people who stay in these encampments, are they struggling with addictions, or are they also individuals who are sober, but simply maybe have nowhere else to go? What are you finding?
There is a portion, the large portion of them are addicted. There's no question about it. There is a percentage of those people that are not highly addicted or not addicted, but they actually choose to be in the encampments for whatever reason. Could be safety. They may, whatever it is, there might be some mental health issues, those kinds of things. So it's not that they don't have a place to go, they choose not to go.
Also, I would imagine that they might feel like that's their own little space too, that's away from others.
Well, absolutely. Sleeping rough, we've always had sleeping rough. And those people that choose to do that, choose to do it largely because they feel safer on their own. But there are other reasons. So, for example, the shelter, which tries to do its best, but you can't take your stuff into the shelter. You can't take your pet into the shelter. If you're a couple, you can't go into the shelter and be together. You have to be divided. So there are other reasons that they choose not to use the shelter or other places. And we have no other affordable housing or any kind of social housing to put them in.
Well, it kind of makes sense then why they would rather just be in a tent. I absolutely understand.
It's not ideal, and it's not necessarily their first choice.
For sure.
It's just a choice that they are left with.
Absolutely. So now, Ken, when the city takes down these tent cities, where do the people end up spending the night?
Well, first of all, there's a kind of a misunderstanding that when the city disperses a tent city, they take all their stuff. They don't, because it's their stuff. The city can't take away their tent, can't take away their tarps. But they basically come in and say, look, you can't be here anymore. You need to move along. And so the people just disperse and set up in other locations. They'll go. And so if you're driving down the corridor, you will see 2 or 3 currently on the hillside on the exit coming up onto Stafford Drive. There are some in the Kinsman Park off of 4th Street now. So they just spread out, They're obviously back at Civic Center, and they will congregate more and more as they begin to trust one another. But yeah, they don't go away. They're just relocate.
For sure. So what are the solutions to this then, Ken? Some are advocating for the city to set up temporary shelters on city land. So what do you see as being some of the pros and cons of this?
Well, it's unfortunate that the end solution needs step to get there. There are the pros to having a location where they can go to are that generally then you will have that at-rough population kind of in one area. So for monitoring them and working with them, it's a little easier than we have now where we've got to go to 6 or 7 different sites. However, when you congregate them, your crime goes up, and crime includes things like sexual assault, abuse, violence. You had the issue with the shooting, so you got more people in one area, you're going to have more tension. So that's a con that's the pro and the con. So and really, it's difficult. We need an overall arching solution that will get us from A to Z, and that takes a lot of effort and a lot of collaboration between community, the citizens itself, the levels of government, and it's expensive.
I'm sure there's a lot of red tape there too.
A lot of red tape. The unfortunate part of it is some people just want them to go away. Don't let them in town. That's not a solution. Okay. The solution is to begin asking ourselves the questions of why do we have encampments, and then if we understand why we have them, then okay, that's fixed the problem.
Kind of that chicken and egg solution.
Well, yes. The reality is it is a chicken and egg solution, but we're not asking the right questions.
Interesting. Okay, now Ken, Streets Alive has a recovery program for both men and women along with temporary housing, as you mentioned before. So how successful has that been so far?
It's extremely successful. We have, obviously we have our failures, but overall we have a large amount of success. We celebrate 90-day, 120-day, 6 months, 1 year, people that are sobriety. We actually have people at 3 and 5 years now. We have people that have returned to families, men who had lost their ability to visitation with children that now are back being fathers.
Wow.
We've had women who have recovered the rights to their children. So it's not just helping people out of addiction, it's helping restore family. Okay, it's a long process, but we are extremely successful at it, and we just want to continue to do it.
Okay, so with that said, would you like to see programs like that expand? And if so, where would the money come from to do so?
Well, I mean, obviously for us, we would love to do more of what we're doing. Okay, for us, we would prefer private sector dollars. Private sector dollars allow us the freedom to do the things that we believe we need to do in terms of our faith and what we know will create the right outcomes, which is really how do you deal with trauma? You have to heal the trauma, and there is only one healer. The government is attempting to do what it can do. We have the new Lethbridge Community Center that's out by the jail that should be up and running by next year. But again, people need to be moved into recovery now because the drugs are deadly.
Absolutely, they are. Now, Ken, if the government does end up providing more affordable housing units, will this actually solve the problem, or do the root issues need to be addressed first?
More affordable housing units are part of the solution, but no, if we don't go after the root, then the problem just continues to grow. It's not that It's not that it stops growing. It grows. Addiction is a horrible, horrible thing. And with what's been going on in the world with COVID and now with inflation, more and more people have less and less hope, and that drives them into addiction. So yes, we do need more affordable housing, but we also need the pillar where we're actually treating the problem.
Yeah, like you were mentioning before with the chicken and the egg, absolutely. So yeah, to what degree have you found that mental health issues play a role in homelessness?
This is another chicken and an egg thing, because what came first, the mental health problem or the addiction? A lot of addicts have mental health issues, and so it's kind of a twofold thing. But certainly, whether the root for an individual is mental health or whether the root for an individual is an addiction, we still have to treat that root. Most addictions are based in trauma of one form or another. And that's what we have to go after. We have to have trauma-based recovery programming that will get to the root issue and then free the people up.
Mm-hmm. And should that start at the government level? Like, what should the government be doing to address that issue?
John F. Kennedy said, we should not be asking what the country can do for us, but what can we do for the country? For me, the church needs to ask itself, what can we be doing for the people in need? Not what can the government do for them? I firmly believe, and have done this for 30 years, because I believe the answer to a lot of our social problem lies within the power of the people of the church, the people of God who not only have resources, but have the compassion and the understanding that they know that we need to deliver the good news. We need to bring hope to those that have none, and we need to do that at whatever cost it is, because it is the call in our life to bring people to reconciliation. So it's not what we should be asking the government to do. All I want from the government is permission. And other than that, we can do what we need to do with the power of God.
Excellent. So Ken, how can viewers get involved to help find solutions to this ever increasing problem of homelessness?
I mean, there are 2 or 3 city committees that are currently active. They're actually community committees that the city has requested that are active trying to find solutions. You can reach out to our organization and see where you can get involved. You can get a hold of City Hall and say, what kind of committees can I be on? And it doesn't matter what community you are in. All the communities are faced with these kinds of problems. I'm just saying, become active. Get out there. These are not scary people, but the solutions are going to require a lot of work, time, and energy. But we can certainly develop them and get them there. When Jesus said to the disciples, "Go," he said, "Become active." We need laborers in the harvest. Go. We can't sit in our homes anymore. We can't sit in our church pews. We have to be out in the community where the problems are. And one thing everybody can do is educate yourself. There's lots of stuff on Google. Go in and educate yourself on homelessness. Take a look at the things that are happening in Sacramento or Seattle. And some of that works here, some of it doesn't. But and I get it. A lot of people can be concerned or even afraid. Okay, but sometimes we just have to do it afraid, and we just have to do it if we know that God is asking us to do it. So we know that He asks us to bring hope, and that's what we do.
Yeah, definitely. Well said, Ken. It looks like we are about out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And I hope everyone is blessed today.
Thank you. Ken Kissick is one of the co-founders of Streets Alive Mission in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.